for this. Perfect. All right. Well, I want to thank you, Dr. Shermer, for taking time out of your day to being interviewed by me. I really appreciate it. And just a little bit about me, I guess, is that I'm from Providence Christian College, and I'm taking a class actually with Dr. Scott Swanson. And one of the goals of this project that we're doing is just to interview people about their worldview and just to
Oh,
understand,
that's right. Yes, that's right. Now I remember. Yeah.
yeah, why you believe what you believe and some of your like rationale and reasons behind like your worldview. So my questions are fairly fundamental and somewhat broad, but it's just kind of like touching on like some of the key core concepts of your worldview. So I guess with that, I guess we can get started. But so would you consider yourself an atheist, agnostic? What would you consider yourself?
Yeah, ontologically speaking, that is on the nature of reality. I'm an agnostic in the sense that Huxley meant it when he coined the word agnostic, that is
Mm,
not knowable
mm,
in some ultimate sense. In an empirical scientific sense, I don't think there's any experiments we're going to run or set of
mm,
arguments that's going to settle the issue. So I'm agnostic in that sense. There could be a God, not likely, but it's possible. But the problem is, what do you mean by God? I
mm,
mean an omniscient, omnipotent being. Well, in 10,000 years from now, if AI continues, it will essentially be omniscient and omnipotent.
mm,
So, or if we encountered a vastly superior extraterrestrial intelligence, which if we do encounter one, that's what it's likely to be. They're not going to be
mm,
5 years ahead of us, technologically speaking,
mm.
like people who think that the aliens crashed at Roswell and gave us silicon chip technology. No, it's going to be vastly. So, what's the difference between, relatively omniscient and absolutely omniscient for a being who is deeply fallible like us and
Mm,
not omniscient? You wouldn't be able to tell the difference. So, but practically speaking, in terms of, just epistemology and what do I believe, I just assume there isn't a God. So I'm
mm.
an atheist in that sense, in the weak sense. So
Okay.
we make distinction between weak atheism, strong atheism. Strong atheism, you would say there is no God,
Mm,
or I believe there is no God, something like that. I don't go that quite that far because how would I prove that there is no God?
mm,
Can't prove a negative or whatever. It'd be like saying there are no aliens out there. How do you know?
mm,
Have you checked every corner of the universe? No. Okay. But on the other hand, in the weak atheist sense, I act as if there is no God. I assume there
mm.
isn't.
Gotcha. Thank you. That makes a lot of sense because I know like a lot of people I know they would say like they would call themselves atheists in like the broad sense, but in reality they would be more of like an agnostic person. So they would be like, oh, I don't know. Okay, well, excellent. And so also I wanted to another term that's kind of thrown around a lot, and one thing that I was really fascinated by when looking at your Skeptic magazine, which I really appreciate your strive for the truth and your commitment to finding and debunking what is false and pointing out the irrationality of things. So I want to thank you for that. I think that's admirable and something that we need more of in this world because this world is very crazy. And so it is indeed. So I wanted to ask you what do you mean by skeptic? Because I know in philosophy there's a term like skepticism. So like you're saying like you throw up your hands kind of in the skeptic philosophy and say like, oh, I don't know about anything. But I was wondering if you could touch
Yeah.
on the fact like, what do you mean by skeptic?
I really just mean rationality in science.
Mm,
Just you can start off, and you should start off skeptical of claims.
mm,
Like in science, we have the null hypothesis, which is that your hypothesis is not true until you prove otherwise. So
mm,
you claim that hydroxychloroquine will cure you of SARS-CoV-2, that is
mm,
COVID-19. So the FDA is going to say, no, it doesn't. We assume that's not true. But go
mm,
ahead and run your clinical trials and let's, do your epidemiological studies. And if it's true, then we'll give it our stamp of approval and reject the null
mm,
hypothesis and so on. So I treat all claims that way. You think
mm,
Bigfoot's real? I say, well, that's nice.
mm,
Show me the body, and I'll believe.
yeah,
You think we've been visited by aliens? Okay, not impossible. I don't think it's likely, but it's possible. So show me.
Mm,
And if your answer is, well, I can't show you because it's classified. Oh, okay. Well, then how do I know? Right?
mhm.
So I'm going to remain skeptical until I see the evidence for it. That's all we mean.
Yeah, definitely.
Well, I remember seeing you on the Joe Rogan podcast and was talking about Bigfoot specifically. And what did he say? He was just like, the people who don't see Bigfoot are those who live in the woods all the time or something. So
Yes.
I thought that was
Yes,
very
exactly.
funny.
Yes. Yeah.
So yeah,
Yeah, well,
no,
there's another principle there that if a claim has been around for a long time and people have been looking for a long time and still not found it, that would be a kind of negative evidence. That is to
mm,
say, we would expect the people living in the woods or people that drive out in dirt roads and so on in the middle of nowhere would finally see one of these things, a roadkill, one of them
mm,
died, something, a carcass somewhere, but there's nothing. And people have
mm,
been talking about Sasquatch, Yeti, Bigfoot all over the
Yeah.
world for centuries.
Hmm.
There's a famous story of Reinhold Messner, the great German alpinist. He summited Everest 7 times without oxygen. I mean, this guy is a stud, right? So he had an
yeah.
interest in Bigfoot, Yeti, they call it in the Himalayas, Yeti. So he alerted his Sherpas, if you ever see one of these things, wake me up, let me know. So one day, one of them wakes him up. Oh my God, Yeti's here! He's here! He's right around the corner. Oh my God! So he goes running out there, and it's a big bear. And he goes, "Oh, that's Yeti." They go, "Yeah, that's Yeti." He goes, "Oh, okay." Right.
That's
So,
hilarious.
so there, you would expect to find something at this point we haven't. And, I would say the same thing, negative evidence,
Mm,
like with the WikiLeaks, millions of classified documents in there,
mm,
revealing quite a few very embarrassing things for the State Department and the
mm,
Pentagon. About our various wars and wiretapping,
Mm.
foreign leaders and spying on people that we shouldn't be spying and so on.
yeah.
Not one document in there about 9/11 is an inside job by the Bush administration. Not one document about the fake moon landing, or the aliens are being kept at Area 51. Nothing.
Mm,
So when people say, well, it's classified and they're keeping it a secret, well, but we have millions of classified documents leaked. There's not one. You would expect at least something,
mm.
right?
Yeah,
So there's
totally.
the principle of negative evidence also plays a role there.
Yeah, and I also wanted to
That their principle of negative evidence I find really, really interesting. And I wanted to ask about how does that relate to historical evidence? For example, we have like a lot of historical claims that have been around for a very long time. I'm thinking of like Napoleon, Alexander the Great, Julius Caesar. So how do those types of negative evidence relate to historical evidence? Or like how do you treat historical evidence with like that type of framework?
Well, so there you have a convergence of evidence or a
mm,
consilience of inductions, as it's called in the philosophy of science. William Ewell's phrase, consilience of inductions. That is to say,
Mm,
it's not just one line of evidence that points to the existence of something, but multiple lines of evidence, and they all converge toward a particular conclusion.
mm,
So like are greenhouse gases causing global warming? Is global warming real and human caused? Well, the vast majority of climate scientists think yes, that is. But there's not one argument they're making. They have multiple lines of evidence. Glaciers
mm,
and CO2 gases and
mm,
rising sea levels and changing patterns of animal migration, and just these are different scientists working in different labs. They don't know each other. They publish in different journals, and they
mm,
all come to the same conclusion. Now, it's possible they're all wrong, but not likely. But
yeah.
even so, the alternative people, the people that are skeptics of climate change, they
mm,
offer a few alternative hypotheses like sunspot activity or volcanic activity or whatever. But their lines of evidence never converge, consistently toward one of these alternative hypotheses. So that's
mm,
an indication that, that they're probably wrong. And
mm,
you could apply to history should be treated as a science. I mean,
mm.
much of what we talk about in science, paleontology, archaeology,
Hmm.
history, historical geology, much of astronomy, cosmology. These are all studying events of the past, in many
Hmm.
cases, the distant past. I mean, deep
Yeah.
time, going back millions or even billions of years. How do they know? There's, no one was there. Well, they know from multiple lines of evidence.
Mm,
Like how do we know the age of the universe? Well, you can calculate that by the expansion rate of the distant
Hmm.
galaxy, the redshift, all those sorts of things. And it's not just
Yeah.
one lab, it's multiple labs.
Mm,
And they try to debunk each other and they try to, corroborate or test each other's data to see if they get
Yeah.
to replicate. So all those kind of add up to a degree of confidence, more or less, in a Bayesian way, in
mm,
which we say, you know, not 100% capital T truth, but small t truth, probably true. You know,
Yeah, no,
something
totally.
like
And
that.
that, yeah, no, thank you. That's really, really interesting. And like treating history as a science, I find very, very fascinating as well. Because there's a lot you can like take from and gather and seeing if everything corroborates just as we look at other theories, just like as we use the scientific method for other
Yeah.
things. Um, so that actually perfect. This is like a perfect segue into my question about truth. So this kind of goes back to some of the questions I have about like more fundamental core concepts. So based on what I've seen, like what you've done on social media and in your books, defending like these ideas of like objective truth, like objective values. So I'm wondering if you could like kind of explain a little bit about what you mean by objective truth. Because like from a Christian perspective, I would be saying like, oh, objective truth, like aligns with what God has said, like in his creation, and whatnot, and so forth. And then so I was wondering if you could kind of explain within your worldview about what you mean by truth or like
Yeah.
if there
Yeah.
is
Okay.
objective truth.
Right. So our commitment, my commitment to universal realism is that there
Mm,
is a reality and we can know something about it.
mm,
The tools of science and rationality. So when I talk about science, I mean the whole package. Philosophy, science, rationality, logic, reason, empiricism. All the different tools we have, in which I also apply to understanding moral values and what's right and wrong to the extent that we can. So here, I'm not saying you go to your paleontologist to decide what to think about abortion, whatever.
mm.
Right? We just use all the tools we have, and
Yeah.
so by objective, I mean it's not just subjective me. It's not just what I think. It's not a internal subjective preference in which I just feel like this is my truth. Well, good for you, but I feel different. So how can we decide? And my favorite example of this is what I call Sagan's dragon. This comes from
mm,
Carl Demon Haunted World. So the thought experiment is I have a dragon in my garage. Would you like to see it? And you go, yeah, that'd be cool, right? So I take you to my garage, I open it up, and you look around, and there's some bicycles and paint cans and a ladder, and you don't see it. Where's the dragon? Well, this is an invisible dragon. Oh, really?
mm,
Invisible dragon. Okay. Well, how about we scatter some flour on the floor, and then we'll see the footprints of the invisible dragon when it walks around. Well, you see, this invisible dragon hovers above the ground about a foot. So it's a hovering, levitating, invisible dragon. You're like, yeah, okay, huh? All right, I know. We'll get one of those thermometer things that they use during COVID, where they point at your forehead to get your temperature, and we'll point it around the room, and we can see the outline of the dragon. Well, no, this is a cold-blooded dragon. It gives off no body heat at all. Well, how about the fire? The fire, because he's a fire-breathing dragon. Well, that's cold fire, special cold fire. At some point, you're going to go, look, what's the difference between an invisible, cold-blooded, levitating, cold fire-breathing, invisible dragon, and no dragon at all?
mm,
So, and then if you say, well, I feel the presence of the dragon, you
Mm,
know, and it stirs me to great inspiration and awe, or I feel the love of the dragon. I feel its presence. When I pray to the dragon, good things happen or whatever. Okay, none of this counts as evidence. If,
mm,
it can't just be what you happen to think. It has to be
mm,
something I can see, right?
mm,
And so, a lot of mystical experiences, people take ayahuasca or magic mushrooms or whatever, and they go, hey, there's this whole other reality, in
mm,
some other dimension. And it's like, well, can I see it? Well, here, you have to take the ayahuasca. It's like, well, but that's still in my head, right? I got to get out of my head, right? So the whole point of science is that, uh, you can see it and I can see it and your friend can see it. And here's my lab and you go set up your lab and you run the experiment.
mm,
Same thing I get. In other words,
mm,
it has to be outside of ourselves in some
mm,
way. And now it's possible, everybody in the field is delusional. I mean, this has happened,
mm,
but not often. But usually, you poll the audience, the wisdom of the crowd, they usually get it right on
Mm,
issues because so the fundamental principle is back to the God question. Um, if there, I don't know if there's a God or not, but I do know this for sure. I'm not God.
mm,
There's something else I know. You aren't either,
mm.
right? So
That's
so that's the
true.
principle. That's the principle of fallibilism.
Mm,
That we're all fallible. None of us are omniscient. If you prefer a secular version, there is a reality, but I don't know what it is for sure, and
mm,
neither do you. So we have
mm,
to begin with the assumption that we could be wrong,
mm,
but we're going to do the best we can together as a community using the best tools we have, of the gold standard of tests and experiments and
mm,
blind and double blind and epidemiological studies and, this and that and the other and replication and corroboration and peer review. All those things are there because of this problem of fallibilism.
mm.
Not omniscient. We could be wrong.
Yeah.
So at any given time in history, you said, well, this is what we know for now. For now, it could be wrong. I mean, the Big Bang theory of evolution. I mean, the germ theory of disease, plate tectonics, and geology. These are pretty well supported. Not
Yeah.
likely to be overturned
mm,
anytime soon, and this would not happen by just one experiment or one person in a lab working alone. I've found out why Einstein was wrong, and I mean, I get these papers people send me all the time. These are by outsiders. I've been working on this paper to show Einstein was wrong about general relativity. Did you run this by your like high school physics teacher? No. It's not likely, okay, that this guy,
mm,
because for a century, everybody who knows something about the field has tried to debunk Einstein. They didn't like
Mm,
Einstein was not well liked. I mean, he was Jewish, and
mm,
there was a lot of anti-Semitism in Germany
mm.
at the time where he was working,
Yeah.
and he published in mainstream peer-reviewed journals, and he passed all those, and still, it wasn't until 1919 when Eddington did the eclipse experiments that showed the
Mm,
bending of the light that that Einstein became famous because everybody said, "All right, I guess it's true." And then
yeah.
Einstein himself became the old man of science in the 30s and 40s. He pretty much rejected quantum physics. He says, "This just can't be true. This is just crazy. God doesn't play dice with the universe and spooky action at a distance." And so he kind of got left behind, actually. And
mm.
so there's a lesson there too about getting stuck in a paradigm and so on. And so all that's possible. Anyway, I'm kind of rambling a bit there, but that's
No, no, no worries. I really appreciate you kind of like elaborating on this sort of stuff. So like the idea of like the principle, you said the principle of fallibilism. Is that what you said?
yeah.
Okay, I've never heard of that before. So that's really interesting. The principle of fallibilism and this idea of like you want a bunch of corroborating and wealth of evidence to support your beliefs or like your positions on things. And then
Yeah.
would you say that it's always like your theory or like your opinion on something is still in change of like flux because new evidence could arrive and then
Well,
that
you
could
think of it
change
as,
it or
yes, you think it, well, so here's how a Bayesian would think about it. Reverend Bayes, Thomas Bayes, and his, putting everything in terms of probabilistically true or false. So
mm,
it's, and there's something called Cromwell's rule in Bayesian reasoning. Oliver
mm,
Cromwell, the famous English jurist,
Mhm.
said, "I beseech you in the bowels of Christ, think it possible you might be mistaken." Very famous quote that he wrote to a Scottish church. He was
Mm,
trying to tell him you might be wrong about it. It was some political issue, but so this has become called Cromwell's rule. You might be
mm,
mistaken, right? So you never assign a one or a zero to any claim. That is, it's
mm,
never 100% true or 0% true. It's you got to put a number on it, somewhere between one and
mm,
nine, let's say. So like for theory of evolution or plate tectonics, germ theory of
mm,
disease, these things, Big Bang, 99, I'd put a 99% probability of being true. UFOs or UAPs as extraterrestrials, I give it like a 1%, pretty low. But the Bayesian way to think about it is I will change my mind if you
mm,
show me new evidence. That is to say, if you show me new evidence, I'll update my priors. My priors are that I know a lot about UFOs,
mm,
and I'm pretty skeptical because I've heard these claims for so long. and I never see any evidence. And so I would give it a low a prior, a
Mm,
low credence of like 1% based on my priors. But if you show me, you take me to the warehouse and there they are. Oh my God. And it's not like Penn and Teller or Copperfield setting up a fake magic trick for me, right? It's
yeah.
uh or if someone like a Marco Rubio or somebody that, is relatively trustworthy says, yes, I saw the craft, there our secret Pentagon DARPA project. Oh, okay. I'm likely to believe it without seeing it myself.
Mm,
Yeah.
So then I'll update my priors and change my credence to a higher number,
mm,
right?
Excellent.
So, I just apply that across the board. Any claim you want to make, you know.
Any claim. Gotcha. No,
that's I feel like that's like the from what I've read from your books and stuff, like your highlight on reason and rationality, and especially your new book, right? Conspiracy, like debunking, right? The tagline is why the rational believe the irrational.
Right, right.
And so it's like the focusing on like, well, look at the probability of things and making sure like, well, if you're just believing it because you believe it, because in my class right now, we're talking about like the faults of fideism. So it's like it's the idea like in Christianity where like, oh, I just believe it because I believe it because the Bible says it's true. And here we are looking at it, and it's like, well, that's actually a bad worldview. That's a terrible worldview, actually. Because I mean, even as a Christian, I would say that I hopefully want to believe what I want to believe based off the probability and substance and quality of evidence. And so,
All right,
yeah, I
let's
think
let's
that's a good
uh,
project.
let's follow that thread for a minute. So
yeah.
you talk about fideism, fideism. So
Mm,
this is a pragmatic theory of truth. Now, you can't apply that across the board, just, anything and everything is true because I want it to be. What James had in mind, William James, is that there are certain issues that can never be resolved empirically or rationally through
Mm,
and syllogisms and so on. And there's just a couple of those. Free will determinism is one of them.
mm,
I certainly feel like I'm free. Even the determinists I know, they don't act like they're determined at all. None of them act like determinism is true. Um,
mm,
I can't prove that I have free will in the libertarian sense,
mm,
libertarianism, but actual total freedom. Uh,
mm, mm,
I'm a compatibilist on that particular issue, but I recognize the determinists have good arguments. So there, James would say it's okay to just believe that free will is real because it feels like it is. It makes a difference in your life. We have to have a civil society. We have to hold people morally accountable and
mm,
culpable for their actions, and
mm,
so on and so forth. Um, and James also put God's existence into that category.
mm,
You
mm,
can't really prove it one way or the other. You guys have your arguments. The atheists, skeptics have their arguments, going back to Hume,
mm,
back and forth, back and forth. Um,
mm,
it's never been settled ultimately, and which God or which religion is additional factors. But so
mm,
therefore, if believing works for you, if it makes a difference, then go ahead, or prayer, whatever, just go ahead, do it. But don't try to claim you could prove it. That is, it's on the same level as an empirical claim, like
Interesting.
or something like
uh,
that. So I actually, in my next book called Truth, I run with this to see how far I could go. Like for the resurrection of Jesus, this is a big claim, and
Mm,
for Christians, it's very important and
fundamental. Yeah.
fundamental. Yes. Now, could it be a religious kind of truth rather than an empirical truth? Could it be a metaphorical truth or a mythical truth? It's not literally true. It touches on something deeper, analogous to a literary truth. So, the great works of Shakespeare or Dostoevsky or Jane Austen or any great novelist or playwright, it would be silly to ask if the characters are real or if some event in one of the novels actually happened, because you'd just be missing the point. The point is that the novelist, the author, is plung, plunging the depths of human nature, human society, human relationships, conflict, uh,
Mm,
power, truth telling, love, jealousy, anger, revenge. All the things that play out in great novels are truths about the human condition. And what I want to do is say, I think religious literature, the great sacred works, are forms of literature that have deeper truths in there,
Hmm.
irrespective of whether Moses really existed and did they really spend 40 years in the desert, even though there's no archaeological evidence to show that's true. Skeptics are always going, maybe where's the evidence for Moses? Or maybe the
Hmm.
Red Sea parted because of an earthquake or, meteor strike or something. How about it never actually happened? It's a story that conveys some deeper moral homily or moral truth, or it's trying to talk about something else,
Hmm.
and so on. And to me, I think the resurrection story is in that category. I would say, was there really somebody named Jesus? Probably. I think there's decent evidence for that. Here I turn to Bart Ehrman, the great Bible historian and scholar.
Hmm.
He's a
Scholar.
non-believer, but
Yeah.
still. So he thinks Jesus probably existed, and he makes his case for why in his books. And that was he crucified? Well, yeah, the Romans crucified everybody. That's not an extraordinary claim. I mean, there
Hmm.
was two thieves on either side of him who were being crucified for just, thievery.
Hmm.
Like capital punishment was quite common at the time. But the next claim, that he was actually dead, I mean, really dead, not, there's a theory of he was in a coma, for
Hmm.
days, and, you could go full Dan Brown, and they whisked him off the cross and into the tomb, and uh,
Yeah.
he woke up, and he and Mary Magdalene ran off to France and had babies. And, and their family line is still with us, and you can watch
Hmm.
a movie about that. Dan Brown's novel. So, but to me, um, I've read all the books on the resurrection. Here's the arguments for, here's the arguments against. Okay, if you put it in the empirical truth claim category, and you say you have arguments, and this is why you should believe, and so everybody should then,
Hmm.
just like I would say everybody should believe in the Big Bang theory of the universe because it's true. That's why you should
Hmm.
believe. And if you're going to make that claim about the resurrection, I would then say, well, why don't Jews believe it then, or Muslims? I mean, they believe in the same God you believe in. They even believe in the Old Testament, the Bible, or at least the Old
Hmm.
Testament part,
Yep.
right? And Muslims think Jesus was a prophet, but not the Messiah.
Hmm.
Jews, same thing. They even believe there will be a Messiah. They just don't think the carpenter from Nazareth was it. That's not
Hmm.
what the ancient, the Old Testament books prophesy. They don't prophesy a character like that. They prophesy a warrior, a warrior king who's going to, rescue the Jews or whatever. This is what Jews tell me. When
Hmm.
I asked Ben Shapiro, why aren't you a Christian? And he said, well, I'll tell you why. I don't accept the resurrection. Why not? You can watch
Hmm.
my Sunday special episode when I was on his show. I
I
asked him
will.
that.
I didn't know you were on his Sunday special, actually.
Yeah, yeah, it was years ago. But I asked, we were talking about one of my books, The Moral Arc, I think it was.
Yeah.
I, Religion came up, so I
Hmm.
took the opportunity to ask him. You believe in Yahweh, the same God as Christians. You believe in the Judeo-Christian worldview, and he's
Hmm.
conservative. Why don't you accept the resurrection? And he answers, okay. And so, to me, I would say it's not in the same empirical category as other
Hmm.
claims. It's its own kind of truth. It's a deeper truth, sort of like how Jordan Peterson deals with it, right? Try
Interesting.
to
Yeah.
pin Jordan down on if he's really a Christian. Good luck.
Yeah. It's impossible.
And I have Christian friends who are just as frustrated as I am. Like, come on, Jordan, just lay it out, own it, man. And he's like,
Say
no, what
something.
do you mean by the? What do you mean by,
Is. Is.
yeah, yeah, yeah. So I think, he's playing with this idea because he's really into myths, that it's
Hmm.
really in the category of mythology, whatever word you want to use, but metaphorically true, psychologically
Hmm.
true, literary truth, something like that, not empirical.
Hmm.
Anyway,
Yeah. No. Very good.
Excellent. I'm actually glad we went on that tangent because that was interesting, like how your understanding of the resurrection is like a metaphorical, like a story-esque truth versus empirical. Whereas like
yes.
the Christians would say, and I would say that it would be empirically true, and then I would probably what I would do is like attest to the general reliability of like the New Testament documents, the eyewitness accounts, and so on and so forth. So
Yeah,
Very good.
but we don't need to get into all that because I would just
Oh
then
no, of
say,
course, of
if
course
it's so
not. Yeah.
good, then how come these Jewish scholars don't accept? You can't say they just don't understand the evidence. Come on,
Mm,
really? These rabbis are great learned men,
mm,
and I guess, but not many. That they've studied all this stuff. They've read those books.
yeah.
Why they change their mind? And then
Mm,
why don't they read, I don't know, Habermas's book or whichever is the latest one. There's somebody else has
Mm,
a book about the resurrection, and read
yeah.
it. Oh, that's a great argument. I think I'll become a Christian. They almost never do. I mean, some
Yeah.
people choose for Jesus. There's that small little group, but not many.
mm, mm, totally. I have.
Only a couple more questions. One is about human, like what is a human actually? I wanted to ask that question actually. Like what is your understanding what a human is? Because like the rise of AI has brought that question into a lot of people's minds lately. It's like, well, if like we relate down to what a human is, they're able to just like process like information and then spit information out and stuff. Like that's some people believe that. So I'm curious about what is your understanding of like what you believe a human is? Like what is a human like
They're
ontologically?
going to ask me, what is a woman?
No, that's for Matt Walsh to ask. He already asked that question.
How about adult human female? Well, I mean, interesting. Yeah. I mean, from a biological evolutionary perspective, we are our own species. That is, we can reproduce amongst ourselves, but with no other species. Can't reproduce with chimpanzees or gorillas or anything else like that. Now, apparently, we did reproduce with Neanderthals a little bit. Maybe 2% of us have, almost all of us have about 2% of our genomes from Neanderthals. So apparently there was some crossbreeding there. But for now, all the other hominids that were alive hundreds of thousands of years ago, they're all gone and we're the last one standing. So we're a standalone species. And then, of course, you want more than that. That is to say, how do we differ from, say, dolphins or chimps or gorillas? And it's
Mm-hmm.
intelligence primarily. As a quantitative measure, at some point, it's so massively different, it's qualitatively different.
Mm.
Someone just posted a tweet the other day about 50 years of teaching sign language to chimpanzees and gorillas, and they've never asked us a single question. So maybe that's the test. Can they ask a question? Do they are they self-aware?
Mm.
That's another criteria.
Mm,
So sometimes this is called the red dot, the mirror test. You put a red dot on a chimpanzee's forehead, you put him in front of a mirror, and he kind of swipes at it. Like he knows that's me, and there's something weird there, right? You can do this with elephants. They put like a white stripe down their side, and they're looking at themselves, whacking at it
Mm.
with their trunk. Like they
yeah.
sort of, this is perceived to be or interpreted to be self-awareness on the part of the organism. That's possible. Language, what do you mean by language? All animals communicate,
Mm,
but they don't have symbolic language, at least not at the
mm,
level humans do. So it's probably symbolic communication, high degree of intelligence. And so, yeah, AI is going to be able to do all that. It's not doing it yet. I'm not that impressed with Chat GPT. That,
Mm.
they hallucinate a lot. You ask them a question and they just make stuff up
Mm.
off that's not even remotely true. So
Mm.
they have a ways to go. But I mean, even if it's 10 years or even if it's 100 years or 1,000 years, it's going to happen. You're going to
mm,
have a data-like character from Star Trek who,
Mm.
acts like an actor, which is, Brent Spiner, he's
Mm.
human because, well, it's an actor who's human. But it'll be something like that. And there was an episode of Star Trek: The Next Generation in which some scientists want to dismantle data to figure out, how he achieved this incredible level of human-like intelligence. And
Mm.
then, but the captain, or I think Picard, no, Riker didn't want to allow this. So then there was a trial, and basically they went through all this. What makes Data human? He's not
Mm.
really human enough that it would violate his rights
interesting.
to live, right?
Mm,
So they went through all this, his, communication, emotions, some symbolic intelligence, all that stuff. Anyway, so I mean that's an old um, philosophical problem.
mm,
But roughly speaking, we can have a fuzzy set of characteristics that we would say those are the things that are human, and
Mm.
these other species don't have those. Okay.
Yeah. Very good. So like
And at some
symbolic
point,
language.
I mean, centuries, decades or centuries from now, you could say that robot is close enough to being human. We're going to grant it rights or something like that. That could happen in the
Mm,
same way that the animal rights activists have moved toward um, more of a moral or ethical stance. As
Hmm.
Jeremy Bentham famously said, it's not can they think or can they talk, but can they suffer?
Mm.
So the suffering of sentient beings is how we think about are they really human? Just think about the
mm,
abortion.
Yeah, I
You
was
know,
about to
the
bring that up.
vast majority of Americans, not vast, but the majority of Americans are pro-choice in the first trimester, pro-life in the third trimester, and maybe a few weeks into the second trimester, they're like, okay. But then at some point, our intuitions go, you know what? That's just too human-like. Can survive
mm,
outside of the womb. It's not just the heartbeat, but you can measure some neural activity and so on. It's like at
mm.
some point, it's a fuzzy line, but at some point you go, there, that's it right there.
Hmm.
Week 20 or something like that. Yeah.
Hmm.
And yeah, anyway.
No, very good.
Very good. And so I guess another question that I have on humans, because you gave like these specific, like distinct human characteristics where we can kind of like assess and look at them. So I guess this is like, at least from a Christian perspective, it's like, oh, well, so a human is like someone made in God's image, right? And then the human has a purpose. So I'm curious, like under your worldview, do humans have a purpose? Like, is there something where like, is it just like the evolutionary framework, where it's like our only goal is to survive and flourish? Or is there some like ethical, moral implications about our existence? I'm just very curious about that.
Yeah, so you can, take Abraham Maslow's hierarchy of needs as a
Mm.
metaphor, in which, of course, our fundamental purpose of life is just to survive and
Mm,
reproduce. I mean, so we have these incredibly powerful drives vouchsafed to us by evolution to survive and reproduce. So it begins
mm,
there. And all of that happens, if you want to go back even deeper, is because of the second law of thermodynamics or entropy.
mm,
The universe doesn't care about you. It's just doing its thing. It's just, running down entropy.
mm,
And so the first law of life is to push back against entropy, to carve out a little niche of order in the chaos of the universe. There's a
Mm.
lot more ways to die than to survive and thrive. So
mm,
you have to carve that out. You got to eat every day. You got to have shelter and clothes, and then from
mm,
there you start building. Well, so reproduction, yeah, but not just with anybody. So because we have a long dependent childhood, pair bonding is important. And so we have all kinds of neurochemical hormones that, like oxytocin and so on, that cause people to bond and become
mm,
attached and so on. So there you have the basis of love and ethics and cooperation, pro-sociality,
mm,
and these moral emotions are powerful and kind of set up a system of in a game theory way of cooperating when the other person cooperates or sort of a tit for tat if you don't want to be
mm,
exploited, so you got to push back and be have a strong ethic in that sense. But
mm,
um, my next move there is to say it's not enough to fake being a cooperative, good person, ethical person,
Mm.
because psychopaths who do this, they don't actually feel like they want to be
Mm.
kind and nice and altruistic, but they know they're supposed to, so they fake it.
mm,
But usually they get found out. But if you spend enough time with somebody, you kind of know this person is
Yeah.
trustworthy or they're not. And gossip is the way we do that, by the way. That guy, I don't know if I really trust him. Yeah, yeah, I don't either. Oh, okay. Or that guy, he's a stand-up guy, right?
Mm.
And so what we're communicating there is he really believes it. I mean, when this
mm,
person is really your friend, they really care about your well-being. They could be faking, but most of the time you would figure out at some point, oh, this guy's faking. So it's not enough to fake being a good person. You actually have to believe it, feel it.
Mm.
Like I feel really good when I tip somebody that I'll never see again,
Mm.
right? Why do we tip when, we're in a foreign city or whatever? Well,
yeah.
that's because even if nobody knows you tipped, except for the recipient, you know.
Mm.
And, this is Aristotle's virtue ethics.
Hmm.
Changes your character. You become a better person by being a good person. And
Yeah.
that's good for you. It's good for society. It's good for the other person you're interacting with, and so on. Anyway, that's kind of how I build a
Mm.
rational, ethical system around that. And that's as
Excellent.
genuine as it gets. You don't need an outside source to tell you it's good or not.
Mm.
No. Anyway, that's
Yeah.
that's about that.
No, that's
Very good. So you're kind of like ethics, morality, kind of are from science, where it's like we have this like urge, and then it makes us a better person, makes the other people a better person, so we're able to like thrive
Yes, of
together as
course,
like
you
as a
have to structure
species. Yeah.
you have to structure society in a way that encourages that,
mm,
right? So, I mean, we are a pretty charitable country, the United States, in terms of how much Americans give every year. But it doesn't hurt that the government allows you to deduct it off your income taxes, right? That's nice.
Yeah.
I appreciate that. Maybe I'll give a
Yeah.
little more, right?
Hmm.
So you nudge people. This is why we need fences and
hmm
boundaries and
yeah,
borders and a military and a police. This is why we have those things because not
yeah.
everybody is like I just described. Right?
hmm
There are exploiters, there are bullies, and you have to deal with them. And anyway, all that is sort of my way of saying, kind of structuring a worldview based in science and philosophy, reason, rationality, and the whole thing.
Yeah. Excellent. Well, I only
Have one more question, and this is actually about what you believe like the purpose of religion is. So we have like this idea of like there are multiple religions out there. And some of your books you've mentioned of like the good that's come out of religion. I believe it was either in the moral arc or the science of good and evil, where you talked about like, oh, well, there are some good that came out of religion. For example, Jesus, who was like, love your neighbor,
Yeah,
and doing all these sorts of things. But then you mentioned the Crusades, the religious violence that
yeah,
has
that
come
was the
out of
moral arc. Yeah, my chapter on
yeah,
yeah.
you're more
arc. Yeah, I actually want to purchase some of your books now because like researching your work has been really, really interesting.
I think you.
Um, and so I'm just curious, like, does religion in society have like a positive role, like in like a majorative sense, or like negative, harmful, a mix of both? Like,
Another way
I'm
I think
curious.
about it is that religion is good when it does good and bad
mm,
when it does bad. So if it leads people to fly planes into buildings, that's bad, or blow up
Mm,
abortion clinics or whatever. But if it leads people to be more charitable, which it does, or give more blood or donate more time to charity, then it's good, right? Now there's a few deeper issues there. Is there an evolutionary argument for adapting
mm,
this religion? That is, we're
mm,
a religious species because it was good for our species. Maybe it's a debatable point. It might just be a byproduct of, something else of our
mm,
pro-sociality. Because whatever religion was 10,000 years ago, it's nothing like it is now, right?
mm,
These small groups and so on.
mm,
But in general, yeah, that's how I think about it. I mean, the vast majority of religious people in the West, especially, are good people just trying to do good things. They're not
mm.
crazy religious nuts. It's easy for the atheists to pull out the radical crazies, just like it is for conservatives to point to the blue-haired nose ring crazy
Yeah.
hair off because Trump won.
mm,
It's like,
mm,
yeah, but most liberals are not doing that, right?
mm. Yeah, like the common
And
sense.
so, and that's another thing that I've appreciated about your approach to these sorts of issues. It's like the common sense approach, and they always say that common sense is not common, unfortunately.
Yes.
But I think it is important to like recognize like, all right, let's see when we like delve into absurdity
Yeah.
here, and then let's like
All right.
move on, move forward. Well, I actually have one more question, and this is actually about, I'm just curious within your framework, because we're going over in class about like the trilemma. Are you familiar with C.S. Lewis's trilemma? Like who Jesus was? Was he a liar, a lunatic,
Oh,
or was he
liar.
God?
How about just
Yeah.
genuinely misunderstood or misperceived by his followers?
Mm,
Or they misread what he said. The kingdom of heaven is within you. Maybe he meant that literally. Maybe like there's no kingdom, there's no heaven, there's no afterlife. The point of it is to make this life better. So maybe when, he spoke to the followers, they just misunderstood him. Genuine misunderstanding, right?
Mm,
Cult leader, not a crazy Jim Jones kind of person. I don't think that. Not a liar. Maybe, liar knows what the truth is and that he's distorting it. Maybe he just genuinely believed he was a prophet or the Messiah, or maybe he didn't think he was literally the Messiah. Maybe he was speaking metaphorically. I mean, there's lots of ways to, have other
Mm,
explanations than the three L's: liar, Lord, or
Mm.
lunatic. From what I read, I don't think he was mentally insane or anything like that.
mm,
Like Jim Jones at the end, who really kind of lost control of himself. I don't think
mm,
he's here, or
yeah.
Heaven's Gate guys, or any of those cult leaders. I don't think
Mm,
that's quite right.
yeah. All right. Well, thank you so much, Dr. Shermer. It's
Welcome.
been
Bye
a
bye.
tremendous blessing to be able to talk to you and actually get to understand your worldview. I was actually like so surprised where I shooted you that email, and then you responded like fairly quickly. I was like, "Whoa, wow, that's awesome!" And so
Well, part of my
you're
job is to communicate what we do to people. So go for it.
Yeah.
And if you
Yeah.
ever get to
so
California, come visit our offices here in Santa Barbara.
Yeah. I would love
to actually, and so you're a very good, upstanding guy, and I appreciate your work. So
All
anyway,
right.
thank you for your time.
You're
I
welcome.
appreciate it.
Bye bye.
Bye.